It's Anna here, and I'm going to show you guys how to play with your foam roller for this little mini foam roller flow. A couple options if you don't have a full foam roller, you could also do this workout with a half foam roller. And you could also substitute a ball for quite a few of these exercises. And I would say just something to consider too, sometimes with the movement, if the profile of the roller or the stability level is a little too much, this is going to be a little more unstable, a little bit bigger profile, then potentially playing with your half roller, it's going to make things a little more stable. It's going to be a little less high. So kind of check in and notice if there's discomfort in any of the movement. It could be that you want to switch between the size or the stability factor of your tool. And the ball is nice kind of as a alternate prop to use for this workout because you can have a less inflated ball or a more inflated ball too. So that'll kind of mix it up, and I'll kind of talk about some of those things as we go. But to get started, we're going to lie this roller down lengthwise. And kind of the best method to get onto it is to start by sitting on the roller on one end, especially if you have your full roller, and then simply sliding your arms out to the side. And you want to have your head and your bum on the roller. If you don't have a half roller and you want a little more stability, putting pillows on either side of your roller to kind of pin the roller from moving is a great option as well. So we're just going to start with some easy breath. Usually, especially when we kind of first get onto the roller, it's going to feel a little bit unstable, a little wobbly. So starting to find your breath, right? When we feel unstable, one of the first things that can happen is we'll start to tense and brace. So you can have your arms by your side. You could have your elbows bent, maybe resting your hands on the sides of your ribs, maybe on the hips, and just come into your breath here. So we're looking for a nice three-dimensional breath. Breathing into the sides and the backs of the rib cage, letting the pelvis get nice and heavy, letting the upper back and the skull get heavy. If your roller is a little harder, this is a dense roller, right? We have the melt variety, which is a little bit softer. You could always put a towel on top of your roller just to soften it a little bit if that is uncomfortable for you. So once you've found a couple nice easy breaths here, we're gonna bend the arms and float the elbows up. And I'm just gonna open my elbows out to the side at this 90-degree angle and then close them gently. And so what I'm looking for is a little bit of mobilization in that middle back. I want to feel like my shoulder blades can slide towards the roller as my elbows open wide, and then they'll gently separate as I come forward. It's almost like I'm tracing a big brim of a hat here. And as I'm moving, I'm just trying to find stability with the low abdominals. I shouldn't feel like I have to work super, super hard, but there's a presence of some pelvic floor, a little TA. I'm definitely keeping a little action in my thighs so that rather than the legs falling out to the sides, they're staying nice and stable. Trying to maintain a neutral pelvis here as I open and close. On this next one, you can sweep your arms all the way down by your hips. So we're gonna do some snow angels. Palms will be facing towards the ceiling, and then as they rotate up towards my ears, the palms rotate to face. Now it's okay if you can't touch the ground, right? So if my profile of my roller is really big, this is gonna be a really big stretch if I'm tight through the front of my chest and shoulders. So I can float the arms out. Again, if I have a half roller, that's gonna be a nice option to keep the stretch a little bit more in the range that I feel like I can handle. And just moving with my breath. Now this is definitely a rib cage challenge. So as I reach my arms overhead, the ribs might want to pop and the back might want to arch. We're going to see if we can keep the upper abs engaged slightly. We're not bracing, but we're just keeping those ribs gently soft on the front of the body by engaging those upper ab muscles. And then on this next one, we're going to go into an arm scissor. So I'm going to keep my palms facing towards one another. I reach one arm up towards my ear, and then I'm going to switch to the other side. And so now we're challenging the stability by having those arms move in different ways at the same time. So you might notice a little bit of side bending, a little shifting through the hips. See if you can find a little bit more low core. So again, that deep TA, little pelvic floor activation, stability through the thighs so they're not falling out or collapsing in. And I'm giving permission to my armpits to open. If I try to lock down through my shoulders, I'm gonna find I create a lot more tension. Give me about 4 or 5 more of those, and I'm just gonna show this arm position seated. So our first was our elbows out, our second was our snow angels, and then the third one is my arm scissor. I'm allowing the fascia from my waist to lift all the way up. So it's okay if that arm is coming in contact with the ear. If we try to lock down, we're gonna find this really uncomfortable tension through the top of the shoulder. So let that entire fascial line stretch on the side body. Think of wrapping your armpit open. And then remember that we're trying to keep the ribs a little bit under control as the shoulder blades are moving here. So when you finish that last one, we're gonna stay in that same position on our roller. I'm gonna bring my hands behind my head, and I can wrap my elbows as close as I need to find a little stability here. I'm gonna nod the chin, support the head, and curl up, little crunch, and then I'm gonna lengthen back down. Now, ideally, we're still working in a neutral. So I'm gonna nod the chin first before I lift. My ribs slide down the front of my body. You'll notice the weight changes from my upper back to my middle back, gazing just towards the thighs, and then I'll lengthen back down. If you wanna play with a different arm position, a fun variation can be to keep the arms reaching overhead, like our hundreds arms, sweeping the arms to the ceiling, nodding the chin, following the fingers, and curling up. And I'm looking to come up just to kind of the tops of my shoulder blades here, now that we've sort of become aware of where those shoulder blades are. And a big component of this is just making sure that I'm really nodding my chin first before I lift, so that I'm not overly straining my neck to come into my ab work. Just waking up the core here, finding that flexion at the ribs, so my ribs are folding up, and then lengthening back down, controlling that pop through the low back. Rest your arms down by your side. We're gonna come into a little low core activity. So finding my obliques here, I'm gonna come into my imprint position. So I might have a little space between the foam roller and my low back. Maybe my back is resting. I'm gonna use my low abdominals and my obliques to come into imprint by drawing my ribs and hips together ever so slightly to lengthen my low back against the roller. I shouldn't engage so much that my shoulders start to pop up to the ceiling. And then I lengthen back down. So this is coming into a slight pelvic tuck because my abs are drawing my pubic bone ever so slightly towards my chest, and then lengthening. We'll do about 2 more like this. Easy exhale to find that imprint. Inhaling to release. Last one, we're gonna hold this. Now for more stability, hands or elbows can be down by the side, maybe even bringing thumbs to the floating ribs and pinkies to the hips to keep that imprint position. I'm gonna float one leg to tabletop on an exhale, and then lower it back down, and exhale, try the opposite side. So it's getting a little bit more unstable potentially as we're moving the legs that have kind of held us here for that whole first shoulder blade series. So I wanna check in and notice what's going on with my supporting leg. So again, if it's kind of falling out to the side, I wanna see if I can find the inner thigh and outer hip stabilizing. So I'm finding a little bit of awareness pressing into my heel. Abs are drawing in each time as I exhale before I draw that leg up to tabletop, so that my back doesn't pop, ribs don't pop, but I'm using my abdominals and my hips to draw those thighs up. Once you're even on this next one here, we're gonna float one leg to tabletop. Take a breath in, exhale, really reconfirm that imprint position. Float the second leg up. So more support would be having hands down on the mat, a little less elbows. And of course, if you wanted to, you could float the ends up to the ceiling for a little bit more challenge. I'm gonna keep my elbows on the mat and bring my hands to my abdominals so I can really check in to make sure that I'm keeping this imprint. So with flexed feet here, I'm gonna exhale, keeping my supporting leg totally still, going for a heel tap, alternating sides. And again, I'm very aware of my supporting leg staying exactly where it is in space. So it's not gonna fall out to the side or turn into external rotation, but it's staying stacked right over my hip as I tap. Abs are engaged in, shoulders are easy, right? Maybe changing the arm position if you find they're getting a little bit grippy. We're gonna take one more on each side. Exhale to tap. And last one. And then keeping the core on as I lower one leg, and then my second leg. And then to come off of the roller, you're just gonna roll onto one side, nice and gently. And so I'm actually gonna take this roller. Again, you could use your ball, or if you don't prefer the roller, you can always just keep the legs bent together. So I'm side lying and I've got that roller just resting between my ankles and my knees. So kind of along the shin line. I'm resting my head. If I want to pat it, you're more than welcome to place something underneath your head. Palms are facing one another, and I'm lying in one long line on my right side. So I'm going to sweep my arm up to the ceiling. The arm reaches back behind my spine. So I'm allowing the front of my chest to open. Nice pec stretch here, shoulder blade slides. It's going to gently pull my head and ribs and waist to face the ceiling. And we're going to reverse it. So I'm going to actually squeeze this roller and slide my top thigh over the roller. Then my hip, my rib, my shoulder, and my arm come forward. So we're starting with that spiral leading from the top. It's going to carry me all the way over. My head can roll to face the ceiling. Easy breath in. And I'm reversing this. So now my hip, my inner thigh, my core, my ribs, and shoulder is the last thing to come back over. So nice little thoracic spine twist here. We're going to do 3 on this side. And just notice this little different sequencing, moving with your breath, seeing if you can isolate that initiation. So when you finish that last one, you're going to keep the roller in between your thighs and just roll into your back. So looks a little silly, but we're going to work with, as if this is like a ball, right, our hip roll. So I'm using my abdominals just like we did on the imprint exercise on the roller. And I'm going to find my imprint first. So my abs rotate my pelvis, pubic bone towards my chest. I press through my feet. I lift one vertebrae at a time, take a nice breath in at the top, and then I lengthen and lower back down. As I roll up and down, finding smooth breath, I'm looking for as much articulation as I can, peeling my spine off of the mat, and then lengthening and keeping the spine moving in that same sequence of tail to head and then head to tail. Now you'll notice the foam roller, so having that inner thigh squeeze is going to keep my knees tracking over my toes, and I can have my hands down by my sides. Again, I can always have some tactile feedback, hands on my abdominals or my pelvis, or maybe arms to the ceiling if you notice you like to tense a little bit more in the shoulders or the neck. So when you finish that last roll down, we're simply going to roll over to the other side, restack. So I've got that roller in between my shins here, knees and feet are stacked, palms are facing each other. I'm going to sweep that top arm up. It's going to pass my spine as it starts to reach back. The rest of my spine follows, right? I get to rotate so my chest is facing the ceiling. Maybe I'm looking towards that hand. And then I'm going to slide my knee, top knee, over the foam roller, my hips, core, ribs, shoulders, and then that arm is the last thing to come up. And so we'll take about 3 on this side. And I want you to think about really moving with your back body when you open up. So my core is kind of initiating and I'm dragging that arm like I'm sweeping a paintbrush across the ceiling. When I open, I want to find my shoulder blade so that the front of my chest, front of that shoulder can really relax. That shoulder blade's gliding towards my spine as I open into my chest. And then my abdominals draw me back in. I'm keeping this open. I'm getting a nice stretch as I return. And then you'll roll back onto your back again here. We're going to switch the roller position for a little bit more ab work. So I'm going to slide it underneath my bum, and I can set myself up by just lifting my hips and then setting my sacrum here, my tailbone on the roller. So again, if the roller's a little too high, maybe you do this whole series with half roller or with a more deflated ball, or maybe you get rid of the roller altogether if it's a little too much. So we're going to start with a little stretch to open up the hips. So I'm going to draw my right leg up into tabletop, and then I'm going to lengthen my left leg away. And this should feel like a really nice stretch for the front of the left hip. And if it starts to get into the low back, try activating through your glute by reaching through that heel and see if that changes it at all. If it still feels like too much, it just might be a little too high profile. So I would lower your hips a little closer to the ground. If this feels good and you want to play with drawing the lifted leg towards your chest, you could reach behind the thigh or on the shin. Give yourself a nice little stretch here. Easy breath. And then I'm going to take that right leg, I'm going to place it on the ground. So here's my shoulder bridge position. And I'm keeping both hips on the roller. So it's a little assisted. I'm not really lifted all the way up, but I'm finding a little bit of glute engagement. Core is active to protect my low back. And I'm going to float that left leg up to the ceiling and then reach it back down. So this is kind of like our single leg shoulder bridge, but I'm not having to work as hard because my hips are connected to the ground here. And I'm just looking to activate through that left leg, right? Supporting leg is active as well. So I'm getting a nice active stretch through the front of that hip. Little relief if you sit quite a bit for work or commutes. And then on this next one, you're gonna bend the left leg in, and then you'll lengthen that right leg out. So now I'll take the stretch, and maybe you just wanna keep it floppy for a moment and breathe. If you notice, again, any low back tension, see if you can activate through your glute, reach through that heel. Maybe you wanna draw that thigh in towards your chest a little bit. Easy breath here. And then we'll bend that left leg down. So now I'm in my shoulder bridge position on my left side. Now again, notice if you're really popping through the ribs, and that could also be a sign that this is a little too high for us. We're gonna find that core, we're gonna sweep the leg up and down just to a hover, and I'm using my glute here to support the leg as it lowers, right? Strong glutes typically mean we have less tight hip flexors, our low back is a little bit happier. So a good piece to activate if you do a lot of sitting or forward movement in your day, get that posterior chain to turn on. And then I'll have you just bend that leg in and lower that leg down. So finding a slight imprint feeling. So I'm drawing my ribs and my hips together, and I'm gonna do a one leg lift here. So same choreography as earlier, we've just changed the position. I'm exhaling to lift. The challenge is now going to be on the lower. So as I lower, I'm much more likely to pop that space between my ribs and my hips, which might mean my low back starts to extend a little bit. If this is feeling okay, float one leg to tabletop, pause, bring the second leg up, flex the feet. So here we go, a little toe tap. Now this is a lot further behind us with our hips lifted than when we're doing this on the mat. So really working those glutes as you tap down, and then the abs to counter the ribs in the back from wanting to pop or change position. If this is feeling good, once you're even, you can take this into a bicycle. So you're gonna reach one leg long and then sweep to the other side. Now you could point your feet and feel free to play between pointing and flexing. I like a flex because I find I can really engage my glute here. So here's that nice open hip. I'm extending through the front of the hip, activating through the glute and hamstring. Core is active. We'll take about 4 more like this, still breathing. Good, and 3. Last 2 sets. And last one. And then just being conscientious when you're setting your legs down one at a time, keeping the bum on just so as not to strain in the low back. We'll set the bum down here. Keep that roller in between your feet and your bum, and just take a little gentle kind of windshield wiper from side to side. We're gonna place the feet on the roller. So you can slide that roller down a little more. Little more unstable. The tendency is we're gonna wanna push the roller away. So see if you can draw the roller in a little closer. So you're having to work that lower hamstring here, back of the knee. Once you're feeling square, we're gonna try a little scoop and a lift. Now you might find on these first hip rolls, and again, you can have arms down, arms on the body, arms to the ceiling. You might find you get a little less articulation in this range, and that's okay, that's pretty common. See if you can still work that initial piece with the abs. So you're still rotating the pelvis, pubic bone, towards your chest, peeling up, and then seeing if you can keep the hips as high as possible, reaching the knees long, but drawing the heels towards your glutes, and then melting the sternum down. And this one is just one of those, you don't do it a lot, it will be a little stiffer until you gain the strength in that portion of your hamstring. And this is a lot of extension through the front of the hips. We're gonna stay up on the next one. Take a nice breath in, stabilize through that left hip, right? Checking with the ribs that we're not popping. We're gonna float the right leg to tabletop and then lower back down. Stabilize through your right glute, float the left leg. Couple more like this. Easy breath, noticing if the roller starts to get a little further away, kind of find that refresh of the supporting leg, drawing heel towards bum before you switch to flip. And then there's a tendency to want to pop a little bit in the ribs, so just keeping those ribs really stable. We'll do one more on each side. Easy breath in here, really scooping the abs to rotate the pelvis. Here's your imprint. Roll all the way back down, lengthen those legs out. Give your legs a little flop. We're gonna take just a little ab work here. So arms are gonna be behind the head. I'm gonna bring my right leg to tabletop. Coming into my imprint position. So again, obliques drawing my ribs towards my hips. I'm gonna curl up as I draw my left leg in and then lengthen back out. Drawing that leg in. So it should feel like there's a little bit of stabilization happening, inner thigh, bum, abdominals, but that left hip flexor can be really relaxed. Thinking of finding that heel drawing to bum cue that you just found in your shoulder blade. And then these next couple, if you want to add a little twist, you can come into an oblique crunch, rotating to the left. And we'll take about 4 more like this. And if you need to adjust your roller, right, sometimes our props move a little bit and that's okay. 1 more here. Nice, and then you can lengthen that right leg out and make any adjustments you need if the roller started to scooch a bit. Draw that left leg into tabletop. Again, coming into my imprint. Maybe switch your clasp just to mix it up a little. And we'll start with just an easy crunch as I draw that leg in and lengthen back out. And so I'm looking for stability in terms of the weight between my right and left hip. My supporting leg isn't meandering off to the side, but it's staying really steady. And I'm nodding my chin first. That support's happening at my mid-back. If you want to add those rotations, you can start to add a little twist. When you're rotating, it's more of an up and over. What can happen sometimes is we can kind of lean to the side and you'll notice you're resting on this elbow. So see if with your obliques, you can curl up and then over. So you won't go quite as much to the side as you think. And we'll try 2 more like this, exhaling as you come up, keeping that imprint as you lengthen back. Last one. Nice, and then you can lengthen both legs out. Maybe give your legs a little flop in and out for a moment. We're gonna come into our full roll up. So modified version, I'm gonna keep my legs bent. I'm gonna sweep my arms overhead. I'm gonna reach the arms to the ceiling. As my fingers pass my eyes, I curl and roll up, and then I can push my legs straight here. Maybe I go for a little stretch. That's totally fine. I'm gonna bend the knees and then roll it back down. If I need assistance, I can always hold on to my legs and sweep my arms overhead. That's gonna be nice if it's hard to keep the back in a good place. If you're ready for your full roll up, bring your legs all the way together. If your knees are locking down, see if you can actually squeeze them together. So getting a little bit of bum and hamstring right at the top and inner thigh. I'm gonna sweep my arms up and then curl and roll. And again, you can either just come to upright. If it feels nice to take a little stretch, please, by all means. Right, this is a nice little flow you can throw in just to get the body moving. And we'll take about 5 of these of your choice. Trying to watch that you're not overworking the momentum. Your arms are levers, so they can definitely help. We just want to watch for moving so fast that we're slamming into these. See if you can really find that pelvis rotation that we worked on in all the shoulder bridges. When you finish your last one, you can have your legs come out a little wider. Now, if sitting upright is a little challenging for you, sitting on something, so a cushion or yoga block or a pillow can be really beneficial. You can also bend your knees. If neither of those feel great, maybe the roller's a little too wide, you want to ditch the roller, have the legs more forward, and you can just have your hands on your shins. So we're going to do a little spine stretch forward here, and I'll show it the roller. So I'm starting with my spine stacked against an imaginary wall. So here's the same crunch piece. I nod my chin, and then I'm going to fold right at my ribs. And so that's what kind of creates that initial movement in the roller. I'm going to keep my tailbone pointing down and roll forward just as far as I can stay on my own sits bone. So hamstring stretch, my bum back is a little different. This is more of an active core exercise and spine stretch. I'm going to scoop my abs up like a giant zipper, restack. So this is really helpful if you like to either lean, slouch, or your ribs pop. This will give you some really good feedback of where is your seated and standing stack. Exhaling, drawing the abs in. right? Because ultimately we're doing a lot of these exercises to improve our posture. And posture is a moving component. So it's posture when we're walking, posture kind of when we're doing errands day to day. When our body is in a balanced posture, we have less pain, but also the muscles work in the way that they were meant to work. So, keeping that kind of in mind, the seated exercise that seems pretty simple, maybe choreographically not too interesting, is actually a pretty important piece of feedback in how we're standing and sitting for most of our day. So when you finish that last one, I'll have you cross your ankles. We're gonna come onto the foam roller with our hands. If wrists are a little sensitive, then I would say opt out and just have the hands on the mat. You could also have the hands a little wider if that feels better for you. So keeping the action of, rather than sinking, I'm really pressing into the roller. It's gonna give me a little feedback with that stability. I'm gonna round my spine, scooping my abs, little cat-cow here, and then I'm pushing away so I don't get to sink, and I'm extending the chest forward. And this just gives us a little bit more space in our upper body, and definitely gives us some feedback into how active our arms and shoulders have to be when we're doing this movement. It's a little bit easier to just sink into the shoulders and our cat-cow when we're on a flat surface. So little micro movements are giving us some really good info. Try one more here. And then take a nice rest here. We're gonna switch this roller to our shins. Still hands and knees. A little microphone movement here. So to start, I'm gonna find a place just below my knees and my shins that feels comfortable. Here's where you wouldn't be able to do this with the ball, but you might want to put a towel over the roller if it's pretty dense. So already there's quite a bit of adjustment. So my obliques are having to work pretty actively to sustain this pose. I want to make sure if my shoulders are a little bit towards my ears, that they're stacked underneath my wrists, are rather stacked underneath my shoulders rather than in my ears. I'm gonna start by pushing out of the ground with my arms. I'm stabilizing through my supporting glute, and I'm gonna reach a leg back. And then I'm gonna come in, and I'm gonna try the other side. So if your supporting hip is falling out to the side, so if it's immediately kind of swinging before I move, I'm losing that supporting glute. So think about keeping that inner thigh really drawing to midline and almost pushing with your supporting hip to extend that leg out. Now this is feeling good. Maybe you mix it up by adding a little arm lift and lower, just a really simple row. So we're adding quite a bit of instability. So we want to make sure that we've kind of found our oblique support here. Thinking of bringing that rib to that hip. We'll try one more with just the arm lift. Now you can either keep going with this, or maybe you start to add your full bird dog. Now here's where, if I'm sinking in my shoulder or my hip, I'm definitely going to be much more likely to kind of fall off to the side or side bend, kind of lose my balance in some way. We'll try one more each direction. So here's where that supporting team, so supporting hip and supporting shoulder, pressing out is really valuable. And you can press back here, come off of your roller. We're gonna take a little extensions coming all the way down onto our bellies. And I would go legs a little wider, shoulder mat distance, turned out or parallel, whatever feels best for you in your low back. And I'm gonna put, just because typically our wrists are a little more sensitive, I'm gonna try to put more of my forearm, so between my elbow and my wrist, on the roller here. Now my glutes are definitely on. Hopefully we just felt them working. And my head's just floating in between my biceps here. So I'm pressing the tops of my feet down, glutes and hamstrings are on, and I'm gonna reach away, shoulders shrug up, and then I'm gonna draw the roller back down. So I'm not in extension yet, but I'm finding some mobility through my upper back, activating through my core, glutes, hamstrings. My palms are facing each other. That rotation is gonna be a little bit kinder. When you're ready on this next one, I'm gonna press the roller away. As I draw the roller down, I'm gonna start to float up. And then I'm gonna lengthen back down. Now, depending on how much extension you wanna do, you could keep this pretty small. Keep the floating ribs down, just gaze towards the roller. I'm just opening my sternum and plugging my shoulder blades in. And then maybe if I'm feeling really groovy, I take it to my full swan dive. So play with this, right? Don't go into your full swan dive if you're feeling really tight. Hopefully some of that glute extension work that we did on the foam roller has opened up the front of the hips a little more and activated the core. We're gonna take one more like this. And then on this next one, bring your hands by your ribs here, press back. Take a child's pose, either knees together or knees wide, but let your hands come onto the roller so your ears can drop in between your arms. And you can play with either taking a little shoulder shrug here, or maybe rolling the spine up and down, in and out of your child's pose. We'll try one more like this. And then using the abdominals, you're gonna draw the roller all the way up. I'm gonna rotate to sit on my left side for a little side bend here. Now mermaid legs would be left shin forward, right shin to the side. If this doesn't feel great, another option is to let that right leg just extend out. You're still gonna get a good side bend here if this isn't comfy in the knee, and you can also sit up on something to give yourself a little benefit of those hip flexors kind of getting uninvolved. So I'm gonna take my hand out, I'm gonna take a nice sweep to the side. Same idea, it's okay to let the forearm take a little bit more of the work if the wrists don't necessarily love the pressure. And I'm just taking some nice big sweeps here, side bending over, really thinking about letting the fascia from my waist all the way up to my armpit. Mobilize. We'll do one more like this. And then I'm going to turn to face the roller, both hands here, and I might need to bias the roller more towards my knee if I'm a little tight in this rotation. With my palms down, I'm going to reach all the way forward like that child's pose stretch, and then I'm going to extend my chest up to the ceiling. And remember, you can change that right leg by lengthening it. We'll try one more here. And then to switch sides, I'm just gonna bring that roller to the other side, and I can swap my legs out. So my right shin's forward, left shin back. If this doesn't feel good for any reason, just lengthen that leg out into a little external rotation, or you can sit up on a cushion. And we'll start with that side bend to the other side. And as you're side bending, we're looking for a nice stretch, breathing, so noticing has the breath left. If the ribs are popped, can you soften them a little bit so instead of an arch, it's just like you're moving in between two panes of glass. And try one more like this. And we'll sweep that arm across. So again, if this is a little bit too much of a twist, I can bring my roller out onto the diagonal, and then I'm rounding my spine, reaching forward. And then as I pull the roller in, I'm lifting the chest. So kind of like my mermaid on rotation, or with rotation on the reformer. Getting a little extension, also kind of similar to my bird dog. So I'm curving that spine and extending. And we'll do one more like this. Nice. And if your bum's a little bit tight, a great way to finish, I can take my roller and I'm simply gonna sit on it. Might not work as well on the stability ball, but if you had a tennis ball, you could sort of mimic this. I'm gonna cross my left ankle over my right thigh, and I'm actually gonna lean to the left slightly, and I could have both hands down or I could have one hand down. And I'm just gonna take a couple easy little shifts onto that left glute. I wanna make sure I'm not going onto bone. So I'm just above my tailbone, below my hip bone, just working that glute out a little. I can take some shifts driving with my supporting leg back and forth. And I'll uncross this leg and then go to the other side. A nice little glute stretch here, kind of following the feeling again. It's gonna be a pretty small area, but leaning a little more into that leg that's on top is gonna give you more feedback into that same side glute. Just nice since we activated through the bum a bit today, and if you've been sitting a lot, glutes tend to be tight already, so giving them a little bit of love at the end of a workout is also nice. And then when you finish that last one, you can come all the way off your roller. Good work today, and I hope that gave you some ideas of some fun exercises that you can do with the roller. All of the myofascial rolling out stuff is fantastic too, but it can also be a fun tool to play around with and do some challenging work. So thanks so much.